that all COSATU unions should fight back and go on strikes if necessary to defend collective bargaining. COVID-19 should not stop workers from defending their hard-won rights. We have the freedoms and rights we fight for, and we lose those we do not defend. On government employees housing scheme, the CC is calling the Minister of Public Service and Administration to expedite the process of a government employee housing scheme. We reject the current arrangement for using capitalist banking system to give workers financial support for housing. Workers should be provided housing through their pension money in the GEPF. We demand that the contract with the South African home loans be terminated and a new viable vehicle that will administer the housing scheme be established. On the National Senior Certificate Examination, the CC endorsed SACTU's call for the Department of Basic Education to delay the start of the examination to make sure that everybody is accommodated. On retrenchments, the CC noted that the CCMA is inundated with Section 189 notice that many employers are using COVID-19 crisis to lay off workers even if their income statement has not suffered financial hardship. COSATU demand that government ensures that all employers who have received government support through the IF and other mechanisms must place on moratorium on retrenchment. On the SAC board, the CEC restated the Federation's call for the SABC board to step down. The board's misguided approach targeting workers is unacceptable. The SACB management was exposed by our affiliate Communication Workers Union at the CCMA for presenting a misleading document to justify their decision to retrench workers. It is obvious that they have been telling a heap of sensational lies to the public all along. We demand their immediate removal and the abandonment of Section 189 application to allow a coherent turnaround strategy that will have the endorsement of all stakeholders. On telecom retrenchments and pages, the meeting condemned the ongoing retrenchment that have seen 2,000 workers losing their jobs over 12 months, with more. Let me read it again. The meeting condemned the ongoing retrenchment that have seen 2,000 workers lose their jobs over 12 months, with 220 more on firing lines. We denounce the sinister plan to page a union shop steward by the same management that paid itself millions last year. These workers are being sacrificed in the name of profit, and the Federation is ready to lead pushback against telecom management. There is no other option but to fight back. On amendment of Section 189 of the Labour Relations Act, the CC concluded that the fundamentals of our labour market policy are not sound and that the overall thrust of the legislative framework remain inadequate to protect workers against retrenchment. The Federation demands amendment of Section 189 of the LRA so that when employers wish to retrench, employers has to negotiate with the workers. COSATU wants compulsory third-party intervention prior to the retrenchment taking place. Employers should not be allowed to retrench until the process is complete. Furthermore, the severance package of 1 week for every year of service should be increased to 1 month of every year of service. On call to tighten the insolvency laws, COSATU demands the tightening of the insolvency laws to alleviate the effects of liquidation on workers and their financial security. Union and worker must be informed timelessly of any financial difficulties being faced by business and any possible liquidation at the time that it is contemplated or treated. Any application for provisional liquidation must be served upon the union and the workers. This application must prove that there are no alternatives to liquidation, which will keep the business going and will save jobs. Also, the employer must negotiate with union. If the company is indeed forced to liquidate, the workers' and employers' contribution to medical aid and retrenchment funds should not farm off the liquidated business. In respect of wages and other benefit, workers should be ranked above the secured creditors. On business rescue, the meeting condemned the self-serving conduct of business rescue practitioners, especially in case of EDCON. The Federation demanded an amendment of the Competition Act of 2008 that deals with business rescue so that it can introduce more stringent regulation. Business rescue has a very poor success rate of 33%. On the outstanding legislation, the CISA expressed its unhappiness over President Ramaphosa's failure to sign the PIC Amendment Bill and government failure to implement the Unemployment Insurance Act. The PIC Amendment Bill was passed by Parliament in March 2020. Now, I think it should be 2019. But a year and a half later, the President has failed to sign it into law. Also, Parliament passed and the President assented to the Unemployment Insurance Amendment Act in 2017 and the Labour Laws Amendment Act in 2018. The Labour Law Amendment Acts provide for all workers the right to paid parental and adoption leave. To date, the National Treasury, the Department of Public Services and Administration, the Department of Employment and Labour has refused to abide by these laws and has refused to allow public servants their legal rights to pay parental and adoption leave. This is unacceptable and a point to the reactionary and inconsistent conduct of this administration. Government must stop abusing workers and testing their patience. On the socio-economic and on the National Treasury in particular, the CC has concluded that the National Treasury has mutated into a local version of International Monetary Fund with its insistence of failing neoliberal policies and unpardonable mismanagement of our economy. This mismanagement of the economy and the offensive against the public service show Treasury's bottomless contempt for the workers and the poor. The National Treasury's current policies perpetuate racism and apartheid, separate development because they punish the poor black majority while protecting the inherent privileges of the white minority. COSATU holds the ANC responsible for this crisis because it rejected the proposal for the President to have the authority to override the Treasury's budget and instead reaffirm the Treasury's independence as a core institution of determining budget. The consecutive wing of the ANC in winning this policy, or winning the policy fight, and the poor are going to pay for a huge price for it. This current Treasury is not sustainable, and a pushback is necessary if NASREC resolution are to be implemented. On the economic stimulus, President Ramaphosa's initial 500 billion rand stimulus is inadequate and is not as strong as his language about the economic threat. His prescription did not live to his diagnosis. We call on him to honor his commitment when he announced an economic recovery plan. On the economic recovery plan itself, we expect a drastic economic recovery plan that must include the following: a bold 1 trillion rand stimulus plan, reviewing the excessive lending criteria imposed by the bank on the 200 billion rand loan guarantee scheme that has seen only 37 of its applicants rejected. Further repo rate cuts by the South African Reserve Bank and Commercial Bank, adjusting their lending rates beyond the cuts provided by the Reserve Bank. The government cannot continue to reward financial manipulation instead of economic productivity. COSATU wants government to act to protect homeowners from the bank attachment. Bank and other lenders to extend loan repayment holiday to the struggling consumers and business, or in debt forgiveness for those consumers who have lost their job, who have lost wages and jobs, and business in danger of collapsing. Dedicated sectoral support from government, banks, insurance industry for key economic sectors still under partial or full lockdown or who are experiencing serious financial difficulties. For an example, tourism, restaurant, hotels, hospitality, etc. Fast-tracking the infrastructure program, investment that can create jobs and unlock economic activities in these sectors: port, freight and passenger rail, energy, agriculture and water. Unlocking the mechanism to increase impact investment from the current 2% up to 10% provided under the existing regulation. Impact investment must be directed towards investment that will create jobs and spur the economic growth. A mass public employment program that will ensure that all South Africans are guaranteed a minimum amount of work, and that moves away from the cheap labor system of the expanded and community public works program. A buy local campaign targeting not only public procurement but also the private sector and consumer. This must include targeting key items for a buy local campaign as well as key large public and private sector procures. It must also include using tax incentives and private sector reward system to incentivize local procurement. The urgent adoption of ESCOM Social Compact and the implementation plan by the Presidential Working Committee. The economy cannot grow without a reliable and affordable energy supply. On the retirement funds, the CEC reiterated its position that pensions remain workers' deferred wages and should be invested in ways that benefit workers and should not be used to deal with government policy failures. If government wants to even consider its ideas and proposals, it needs first serious fight to fight corruption and also stop pushing anti-worker and anti-poor policies. We also reiterate our position for COVID-19 affected workers to be allowed access to a portion of their pensions. On the State Bank, the CC concluded that the establishment of a state bank is long overdue. The COVID-19 outbreak exposed our shortcoming of our financial system. Small businesses are forced to depend on the benevolent billionaires for funding, and this is unsustainable. On the gender-based violence, the CEC expressed its worry about the rising level of gender-based violence in the country. Government needs to introduce mandatory minimum sentences for gender-based violence cases to act as a deterrent. The meeting acknowledged the government's commitment to ratify the LO Convention 190. We call on government to move with speed to process it through the cabinet and table it in Parliament for endorsement. On the politics, and the ANC and the Alliance and the corruption. The terminal decline characterized by political rot and the depravity continues to eat away at the soul of the ANC. The lack of political discipline and factionalism risk alienating the workers away from the ANC. Workers are fast losing confidence in the willingness and the capacity of the ANC to honestly fight corruption. They are starting to view their public statement as nothing but phony outrage for political propaganda purposes. It does not help for the ANC to issue statement for condemnation regarding the state of corruption, while reinstating people implicated in the VBS looting scandal and also promoting former mayors for facing corruption allegation to higher position. We call on the ANC NEC to reverse these inwards-looking and political reckless decisions. The cancer of corruption is also weakening the alliance and undermine its capacity to achieve its objective and honor its commitment. It is all very well for the alliance to be public militant about many transformation issues and set up goals like the NHI basic income grant, but if corruption continues, there will be no resources to implement any of those agreements. We have noted efforts from the President Ramaphosa to push back against corruption, but we can only judge the result and not the intention. Aggressive prosecution is the only dependent vaccine to cure the virus of corruption, not speeches, not letters or public proclamation. President Ramaphosa will not win the fight against corruption if he continues to be confrontational averse. He needs to start swinging a big ace if he wants people to trust, if he wants people to trust and believe in him. Half the purpose of the criminal justice system is deterrence. So if the President Ramaphosa wants to win this fight, he needs to ensure law enforcement agencies are efficient in investigating, prosecuting, and imprisoning the corrupt CEOs, senior managers, and politicians. President Ramaphosa needs to know that workers remember his brave New Frontier talk during his campaign for the presidency, and those that are the standard by which he is measured. So far, workers feel that the president campaigned in poetry, but he is governing in prose. He must stop negotiating with criminals and use the only language that they will understand, which is prosecution and sentencing. On the general strike, the CC has resolved to develop a campaign against corruption and the 6th administration failure to eradicate it. Strikes remain an effective way of expressing anger, fatigue, and frustration. Ours is a dire situation, and it is time to fight. We are mobilizing for a general strike against corruption on the 7th of October 2020, on the World Day for Decent Work. Workers and citizens need to force government to act against corruption. On local government election, the Federation reflected on the current state of municipality and resolved that the current political proposal to postpone local government election is unacceptable. If we allow local government election to be postponed, we'll be complicit in corruption. Voters have the right to express themselves and rate the performance of their councillors on the ballot next year. On international, once again, the CC condemned the recent pronouncement by the Zimbabwe ruling party, the ZANU-PF, that the ZCTU and other community-based or civil society organization in Zimbabwe are terrorist organizations. We further call upon the AU and SADC to act decisively against the humanitarian crisis in Zimbabwe. The CC also note that the US and the EU sanctions against Zimbabwe hurts the ordinary people in Zimbabwe. And the CC is calling the US and the EU to leave this sanction as they hurt the ordinary people. Of course, the CC knows that the sin of the Zimbabwe against the sanction is their stance on land. The meeting also noted development in Lesotho and is reiterating its concern that if the situation implodes further, it will destabilize the region and sabotage the economic recovery. As workers, we demand job creation and industrialization across the continent. We cannot celebrate freedom until our neighboring brothers and sisters in Zimbabwe and Swaziland are free. We continue to support the international campaign against the annexation of the West Bank and the Jordan Valley. In line with the COSATU resolution and international policy on Palestine, COSATU denounced the unilateral annexation and appealed to Israel to refrain from carrying out this unjust plan. The Federation condemns the coup in Mali. Dictatorship must be dealt a blow whenever and whenever it rears its ugly head. The AU mission of the United States of America must be encouraged. That's the end of our statement, Comrade Sizwe.
Thank you, Lupal. Yes, that was the summarized version of our long, comprehensive statement. It's a very clear statement, it's self-explanatory. I would be shocked if people were to ask questions. Let me see if is there anyone who wants to shock me.
No intimidation.
No. Modon?
Yeah, can you give the reaction to the news this morning that the UIF sheriff payment was suspended to allow for investigations into corruption? And then also some clarity where you say that President Ramaphosa should weigh the big X against corruption. If you can expand a bit on that, who do you want to see X?
Corrupt people.
Okay. Anyone? Because, okay.
From News of Africa. I just want to find out, you've shown your support for the Nahau strike, the protest action. Some would say that, are you supporting this strike because of the 2018 agreement? Are you using the strike to highlight that this is something that government needs to implement?
Okay.
Just on Marikana, did the CEC reflect to the benefit of hindsight on the role that your affiliate union played or didn't play, and the attitude that COSATU adopted towards the Marikana issue over the years? Any regrets, perhaps? And then on the public service health and safety protest, why are you talking about the uncaring attitude only of the health sector managers and not the state in its broadest sense? Why are you singling out managers and not holding the government responsible? And then on the new affiliate applications and related stuff, have you considered sort of reaching out to some of your former affiliates, including what was once COSATU's biggest affiliate? Thanks.
Thank you, leadership.
Thank you very much, Sizwe, and to the colleagues. I'm going to attempt to respond. I'm not sure if I got your question correctly, Mbongeni, that the UIF TES payment suspension. And I think if it is, on our statement, we are very clear that we are saying those processes must be expedited. For us, we would not understand why would you suspend payment to workers who are the vulnerable ones are waiting, whilst you want to figure out things that may have gone wrong in terms of administration. And we say as a federation, it's not like every day these payments were being made. It's not like government is paying each and every day payments on UIF and TES. So if you are going to start raising issues that you are suspending the payments pending in investigation that you are doing, we would feel that you are saying to workers, we may have done something wrong, including ourselves as those that government that is supposed to be ensuring that there are processes that are correct, but the ones that are going to be punished are the ones that are awaiting. And to us, it then affirms what we've been called for on Treasury to release pension funds for workers. Because remember, whilst you are taking away what workers are waiting for, and remember others have not even been paid, others have been paid maybe once or twice since we went into a lockdown, and they have pension funds. And whilst you are suspending this side, the very same government says to us, but we are unable to release the pension funds, the monies of workers to sustain them for the next 6 months in terms of wages. And we're saying for government, this is just being spiteful to workers who are recipients of these monies, who have nothing to do with the process, that you may have not done what you were supposed to do, expected to do as a responsible department in ensuring that all lines are clear in terms of those processes. So we're saying you can't be punishing workers as you do all these sorts of things. The big X. We're calling for that big X, whoever that is found to be corrupt. We're not going to stand here and say, remember, we know there are processes of people, allegations, and then you go to court, and then you are found guilty. But we are saying these processes, sometimes they take too long. You know, COSATU have said during World Cup 2010, this country was excited and felt it necessary that justice, any injustice that prevails during that period of the World Cup, justice must be served. And to ensure that we have effective special courts that were set aside to deal with any eventuality that may arise, so that by the time people have taken their flights back home, if you were implicated in any form of criminal act in this country, you would have been prosecuted. Why is it taking so long for our justice system? If that same justice system can be effective on issues of 2010 World Cup, we believe that it's going to take a political will and ensure that we bring justice to the people of this country, because the number of corruption cases that we wake up every day, there are allegations. Wake up every day, there are allegations, and what we get is what? A commission that is going to be commissioned to find whether that commission is really capable of finding corruption. It's unnecessary processes. That is why we're saying President Ramaphosa's campaign was poetic one, you know. It's poetry, and then when you must govern, it is prose. All of a sudden now there are tedious processes that you must, tick the T's and dot the I's, and people are getting impatient. So we're saying And also, nothing stops the president from dealing with corruption, allegations of corruption in the state and in the ANC, because there's another conference resolution that says anyone that is implicated in any form of corruption or criminal act, you must internally in the organization step aside. Now, then you have a process in government that has to unfold. So why are we not using the tool to ensure that we have effective processes? So we're calling for that big X for those that are deemed to be corrupt. I mean, if the case in point of a person who's facing criminal charges, you have been charged, you are out on bail, you are appearing in court, and you expect people to trust you when you say the very same person can still run a seat in government at the level of the province. On the house strike, Mbali, of course we support the strike on the basis, not only on the basis of the 2018 agreement. Remember, the strike is not just dealing with those issues, it's broader. We're dealing with issues of workers that continuously working under conditions that are inhumane, not safe, and we expect them, because we celebrate and we say these are frontline workers, but the PPEs, the nature of work that they are performing and the support that they're getting from their employer is completely the opposite of the praises that we're giving. They're doing all they can. You know, the sad part and the sad part about this in relation to healthcare workers, frontline workers, is that, you know, doctors who lived their lives to resuscitate patients, when family members are expecting them to save them and they save these patients, today when they contract coronavirus, they are told in terms of the protocols you can't resuscitate them. They've lived all their lives of their profession, giving all they can. When they are now contracting this virus because of the conditions of work and the salaries that they are getting, for a government to even retract from an signed agreement, and you still expect the very same workers to wake up with vigor, you know, and go to work as if nothing has happened in terms of what they would have signed to, and the retraction therefore of the employer. And of course we support the strike of Nihau in that institution, but of course we support as we say in our statement, the actions that are going to be unfolding from all our public sector unions. And as we say, that COVID-19 does not stop workers from demanding what is rightfully theirs. We can't be victims of our employers and still be victims of COVID-19, particularly when workers are sacrificing and doing all they can to ensure that we are able to go to the shops and still find food there. In terms of other frontline workers, you go to hospital and the clinic, you still expect to find a nurse, a sister, a porter, receiving you and giving you hope when they themselves are hopeless. Thank you very much. I think I'll take those few.
Mike? Take others. Open the book.
No, thanks, Comrade President and the comrades from the media. I think I'll just emphasize on few that President might have left on the affiliation, whether we did reach out to our former affiliates. If you've been following us, you'll remember our National Congress in 2018 instructed us exactly that everybody that is outside COSATU is considered not to be organized. And we will work with all of them, including encouraging all of them to come back. Of course, they are coming back in different forms and different ways, because when we speak about the two affiliates that have joined us, you will know that the AFADO is a union that will now be replacing a former affiliate of COSATU called FAO. It's in that space. Those are the workers who were here, who were taken out of the federation by their unions, but they felt that they need to come back to the federation. If you talk about the transport movement, it is a union that with the workers that used to be here, and at some point they had problems within the union and they broke away, but then the former union, they came back to COSATU. If you see the other, I'm sure the longer version of this, the statement have got many names of the unions that have affiliated, that have applied to affiliate to COSATU, which the federation is considering. So yes, we have reached out, we are reaching out to everybody, we are engaging with a number of unions. Why are we only seeing public health managers and not the entire state? No, we are saying that the entire state. That is why the only thing we're raising here is that, and I'll couple it with our support for the Nihao strike, is that you will remember that at the beginning of the pandemic, when there was a lockdown, all of us were instructed to go and close ourselves behind our doors. Only this sector of health sector, which is an essential service workers, were sent out there to confront this invisible enemy of our nation. Not because they were not anxious themselves, not because they knew better about this pandemic, or not because they were not afraid. They were afraid. And at that point, we felt that society and government at large is not taking necessarily steps to protect, to defend these workers. If you remember, the Department of Health was even taken to court by one of our unions, precisely on these matters of lack of protection of the healthcare workers. We have come to a point as a federation that the frontline workers in general and health workers in particular are the soldiers that do not carry guns, but are the soldiers that over 60 million South Africans depend upon. For us to return to normality and economic activities, for us to go to school properly, we need public health workers to win against this invisible enemy. But we think we find very little sympathy or appreciation from the leadership of the department when it comes to their own work. So that's what we are raising now. But we're not exonerating the other departments. Hence, there's a point where we're talking about the Department of Public Service and Administration, which is responsible for remuneration of these workers, which led a negotiations 3 years ago and concluded a collective agreement. We were here, Mbali, on the 26th of February this year, when that department went to the Public Service and Bargaining Council and proposed to review this resolution 1 of 2018. We made a statement as COSATU that was reckless and that was a declaration of war. So yes, we are not using this track or our support for Nihao because of that. We did say that workers are going to stand up and fight. It's not like it's a new thing. We did warn that workers are not going to allow their hard-fought, won a right to be taken away, particularly the right to bargain and conclude agreements. And then later somebody renege and nothing is done. The state, supposed to be a model employer, must lead by example, cannot lead by an example that it is okay to oppress workers, it is okay to renege or to undermine a collective bargaining processes, because private sector are going to run amok. That's what we mean in our statement when we say, in this country there are rules of engagement between labor and employers, and that engagements are taking place at the bargaining council. Once you undermine that, you are removing the rules. In other words, there are no rules. In other words, chaos and anarchy must reign, and workers can't allow that. one of the things that we're supporting that strike, and that one of every other unions that are going to embark on, is that there's a chronic shortage of staff in the public service, something that for many years the government has been denying. In fact, they've been pushing a language that says there's bloated public service, therefore we need to retrench 30,000 workers, if you remember. It was only up until this year that the Minister of Finance acknowledged that they have not been filling posts. The classes are becoming fuller and fuller every day because there are less teachers. The queues in Home Affairs in the hospitals are becoming longer and longer because there are fewer nurses and fewer administrative staff. The hospitals are dirty today because a provincial hospital that's supposed to have 27 cleaners have got only 3 today, but you expect the hospital to be clean. So workers are feeling overworked but under-remunerated, and that is why they're out there, they're going to fight. But of course, workers are losing their life in the workplace. And if we accept that these workers are soldiers that must defend all of us, and their workplaces is a base or a barracks from which they must plot the attack on the enemy, and you allow the enemy to penetrate the workplace and kill the soldiers there, it means our chances as a nation to win against this COVID are very slim. So everything must be done to protect the base, which is the workplace of these workers. You can't have workers dying and go home and kill their family members, and you expect the nation to win against the COVID-19. So that's one of the reasons we are supporting the strikes. Indeed, you can't continue to tie the hands of workers anymore now and using the COVID-19. There's a fatigue. We have been in lockdown. It's enough. We're going to go out there and fight. So we're supporting them. The X has been reported. Responded to. The tears and suspension, the president have said, we appreciate any efforts to do due diligence and protect the workers' money. Because the one matter that we must reiterate that the UIF is not money from business or money from government. The UIF is money of workers. It is workers who have put it there. Some of them have already died. Some of them have lost their job. So when there are billions that have put up there in order for the workers to be relieved now temporarily because of unemployment, it is actually their own deferred salary. It's not the money that somebody decided they want to give them. So we appreciate the efforts to make sure that the due diligence is done. But that does not mean that you must suspend. If there are people that are suspected that some of them are dead but they are recipients, some of them are in jail but they are recipients, Home Affairs can clarify that and work with the Department of Labor, but those who are deserving that are supposed to be getting that relief must get it now. So we thought we needed to clarify that. Otherwise, there's a lot of corruption that must be stopped. There's a corruption in the procurement of the PPE. Are we going to suspend procuring PPEs because there's corruption, and then therefore leave people not to be protected? So every time there's suspicion of any corruption, you suspend that process. We can't do that thing. So I thought, let me just add that, but otherwise the president has responded. Thank you.
Can I maybe also, as you're coming, deal with the questions Gabutwe on Marikana?
Oh, yeah.
But for your COSATU's attitude towards Marikana, we have nothing to regret, because we have never had an attitude that seeks to blame workers on the issues of Marikana. So I'm not sure when you say our stance, are we regretting our position? What we have always stood against is for any responsible trade union to take workers on an illegal strike. It's not about Marikana, it's just that you can't take workers on an illegal strike. 2, COSATU has always said, as we mourn the 34 miners that were shot on the 16th, there are workers, 10 families that lost family members prior to the 16th. And we have always said, we seem, all of us, to forget the 10. We have never spoken against the 34 miners that were killed on the fateful day of the 16th. But we have always said that let us all remember that Marikana did not start on the 16th. there were incidents that happened prior and lives were lost. And of course, as we have said in the past, and we continue to say it even in our statement, that this is as a result of the greed of capital that has led us to be having a Marikana incident that took place, Marikana massacre. Hence, we are even saying, we call and we reiterate the call for the implementation of the Falam Commission. You see, we have always believed that NUM leadership that at that time went to Marikana, we believe that they did what they could at the time to go and address workers. It was a difficult situation. Some of us were not there physically, but you could see when a leader has to speak inside a police a van or whatever that you call that he was in, because you fear that you may also be attacked, because the songs that are sung are about your head being taken out. Now, COSATU itself, as a federation, we were on the ground, because remember when it started there at the Kopi, there were other small copies that happened in that period during the miners' strike. We also went physically and we interfaced and interacted with mine workers. So our call, Putvuyo, is for the implementation of the recommendations that were coming out of the Falam Commission, and for those that were cited to have done wrong, to be held to account in relation to what the recommendations were saying. And we are condemning the incidents that took place in Marikana prior the 16th and on the 16th of August. There is no reason why lives of workers must be lost when workers are on strike, even if it's an illegal strike for that matter. It does not justify for the state to be using even live ammunition to disperse and control workers in the picketing line. There is just no justification for that. And therefore, we have always said this, and we reiterate our call. And of course, all of us, and I guess including those that would have led probably the strike at a particular time, in hindsight, we always have to look back and say, what is it that we could have done differently? And in order for us not to repeat the mistakes that we would have made, it will take all of us to be able to do that. But COSATU's call has always been and continues to be that the immorality of capitalism to continue to exploit workers and push workers against one another, it is what we are calling all of us as workers in this country to be vigilant of. That we should not at any point find ourselves in a picket line directing the anger towards one another, but rather understand that the employer will continue to exploit the divisions that exist amongst ourselves as workers, because they have no respect for any emblem. They don't care whether you're coming from a federation called COSATU, or a federation called SAFTU, or a union called AMCU, or a union called NUM. They do not care. They see us as just tools to be exploited. And it is at that point that the unity of workers becomes important, that we should be able to say, what is it that we are fighting for? What is it that we demand as workers? On whose interest are we going to pursue the fight that we are going to be pursuing? And if it is in the interest of ourselves, therefore unity is what should characterize ourselves as workers across all lines of affiliation, a union or a federation that we belong to. Because in a battle line, in a battlefield, it is workers and employers. So we cannot therefore have workers, you have two lines divided of workers, and then you have an employer, surely the strength of workers there is going to be tested as we are going to fail. We will never pursue any struggle and think that we are going to win it when we are divided as workers. And we have seen the unity of workers displayed by NUM, by NUMSA, by COSATU, by even in the SAA. You have seen workers who do not belong in the same union, in the same federation, but coming together, because I think learning from even the Marikana massacre is to realize and understand that we will never win any battle when we are divided. Hence, we always make a call, workers of the world, unite. You have nothing to lose but your chains. Until we embrace that and until we accept that, we will always have our differences, but we must be able to say, what is it that we are demanding? Is it different from one another? It is not. There may be some slight issues where we differ, but fundamentally, it is the interest of ourselves as workers that we should be defending when we're dealing with these issues. So I'm reiterating our statement as we put here that what we have said then we continue to say, and we continue to maintain that we are calling for the Falam Commission's recommendations to be implemented, and that including the 10 workers that lost their lives, their families are still waiting for justice to prevail for their own families that were left destitute. Yeah, I'm not sure if there's any doubt.
Unless, no, I was surprised that Vuyo is here because I could not recognize him, and then I still don't believe it's him in this. I'm not sure how employers are going to deal with workers in the workplace, but I don't want to elaborate the points further. I wanted just to say we are engaging with some of the unions that have left COSATU. There are issues that are difficult, that led them to be dismissed, that are not resolved. So there's exchange of correspondence. It's not that we don't meet and talk about these issues. It's that there are complications in dealing with some of the issues, if you refer to NUMSA, for an example. And the President is correct in saying, but in the workplace, there are workers are the same. They've been marching together in ESCOM, they're marching together in SAA, and in all those issues. But on the policy matters, I think that's where there are challenges. In the question of managers, the reason there's a target of management, and I think we appreciate the position you take, that managers are within the administrative. We have taken the administrative to court on many cases and we're still fighting them. But workers in the front lines are dismissed. Workers in the front line are suspended. The workers in the front line are not getting the PPs. That is the terrain of managers who, according to even to the minister, is that no, they're enough, but they're not distributed enough. So the intention is the emphasis on them, but we're not separating them, that it is their mistake. It's a policy mistake. We want government that they are not enough. We went to court, we lost it, and we said we don't have facts. Now what the union said 2 months ago, that's what the minister is accepting today in dealing with those issues. We're trying to close on Marikana. That's the point that what the President is trying to do. It is a painful exercise. We're trying to close it, and that's why we support the issues of the recommendations being dealt and finalized. It won't take the pain away. Every time it's being discussed, it just raised the pain. I mean, last year we were in Marikana, COSATU, and we met with the family of the 10. That is not, the media sometimes is not interested on it. When they report, the media always remember the 34. Maybe it's the, maybe media got a way of dealing with this thing, but there are other people who died, a terrible death in that way. But we're trying to, whether we can see, can we find a closure on these things of Marikana and move forward. So that's what, President, I thought maybe we needed to deal with those issues. On this test, I think is President explained it well. We meet on a daily basis with the UIF, every day from 9 to 10, without fail, every day. We've protected the UIF when people say it must be taken away from the department to privatize and etc. and etc. And we think it's working in a right direction. It was never meant for tears. But there are times that they are making mistakes like this one. There are workers who have not been paid for April. About half, over 500,000, they have not received money for April. So when they suspend, and the number of people who are paying on a daily basis, the volume is huge. Now they are getting SARS to be part of verification, they are getting the banks, but the criminals too are there. But you don't just close. What you need to do is to verify proper and bring more people to look to those applications rather than suspending, because suspending means the workload and the backlog will remain and people are desperately looking for this money. I think that's where we're coming from, that they're trying to do the right things, but they are using wrong mechanism. Thank you.
Thank you, leadership. I thought I was closing. SAPC, I can see you are picketing that side. Let's see.
Yeah, just a quick one. You say that suspending the child payments cannot be justified in the name of fighting corruption. You say also you wouldn't think it right to not to buy or procure PPE because there's corruption. But you call in justify calling a general strike in this type of environment in the name of fighting corruption.
No, there's another point.
Just the last one for me. You were saying that you are embarking on a strike in October. I just want to find out do you plan to carry out the strike, because we do know that we're under lockdown regulations. How is it going to happen? How will it be carried out? Are you calling on all your members to embark on this strike or this protest? And basically, just how will it be done?
Yeah.
No, thanks. I guess it's one question. It's about a strike, but let's start where you started, Muto, that you're comparing it with what we're saying, that you can't suspend a project of relieving people, either saving lives, because there's corruption in it. You must fight corruption. So I was saying, because there are criminals, as the General Secretary says, that are busy wanting to get their hands into the UIF, you deal with that without suspending it, because if that's the route or the solution, it means because there's a corruption in PPEs, you will stop buying PPEs. Because everywhere where there's corruption, your solution is, I'm no longer going this thing because there are people stealing. So you stop buying PPEs. If people still in the process of procuring whatever that the state procure on behalf of our people, and the criminals get in there, you stop. So we're saying the state can't do that. We can't support that. We support the efforts to try and do due diligence and make sure they protect workers' man, but not to stop and punish workers. That's the first thing. And therefore, equally, we are joining the fight against corruption. That's why we're going the street, because corruption also makes it that workers lose jobs. We don't have PPEs today, but how do you face the workers that are in the front line and you say to them, there's no money to buy you PPEs, but they know every day when they look into the media, there's 500 billion there, there's 500 billion there, that's getting all over the place. People are fighting about this man. Workers are dying. So it's better for them to go on a strike to defend themselves. The very same economy is not going, we are saying so in our statement, there's no economy that is going to stand and boom because people will be afraid to go on a strike because it will affect the economy while people are stealing. There's no economy because it's not all about corruption that we're going to, we call it a day of decent work. There's no economy that's going to survive when less and less South Africans are working. When more and more workers are getting retrenched, the buying power of South Africans is getting less because people are losing wages. There's no economy that is going to sustain. So we're going to the street on October to do exactly that. People have not suspended Mali their operation towards workers because we are on lockdown. As the GS have said, workers are being suspended, are being dismissed, workers are being retrenched under lockdown. And the only way workers know to defend themselves it is to go on the street. So this is war. It's not a picnic. We're not going to a picnic that we will say, no, we will only do a picnic when there's no more COVID. COVID is going to be here perhaps for a year or two. By that time, workers, or most of them, will have wiped out from the workplace. So we're saying we're not going to continue to hide behind our doors because there's COVID while we are losing jobs, while we're being retrenched, while the employers are oppressing workers. So we're going to call a strike. We're going to be on the strike on that day, irrespective of the level we will be in by that time. Thank you.
Maybe also just to say that, Mbali, that labor laws are not suspended. Just because there's COVID-19, it does not suspend our labor laws. So the right to go on strike is a constitutional right. It is there. How we're going to deal with it, the modalities, we will deal with those issues as we move towards that date. You see, when people act against, when the state at times and at most act against its people, people would have a recourse. Look at what happened in the US on Black Lives Matter. A black man was shot and was strangled, killed during COVID-19 pandemic. It had to take the people in that country to go on the street irrespective, understanding the risk that they are putting themselves in by going in numbers on the street, but it was to make a point. It was to say enough is enough. And South Africa is no different. The labor laws are not suspended. We respect the protocols, we respect the regulations, but those that are in charge must respect the rights of workers at the same time. So you can't suspend this one because you want to do exploitation using COVID-19 and the regulations. But the nitty-gritties of how we're going to embark on a strike on that particular day, COSATU will constantly be reviewing those issues and say what is the best way to do it. But the date is set. The struggle continues. So it's COVID-19 does not stop us. You know, as Comrade Mike is saying, when councillors were alleged to have stolen food parcels, it did not mean government should stop issuing food parcels because people are stealing food parcels. You must deal with those that are stealing food parcels and continue to find alternative ways of ensuring that food is arriving at the doorstep of the people of this country. That is why COSATU even at that point suggested to the government that use the soldiers, use the police. You have the military cars that you can use for humanitarian purposes in this country. We don't have any other war except the war to fight COVID and corruption in this country. So to avoid all these food parcels that go missing, use soldiers differently than soldiers beating up our people in the streets, you know, and forcing them to a one shack where you have about 10 people living, and say when you are outside the door of the shack, then you are breaking the protocols of COVID-19 when people are living in squalor. Bring back the dignity and the trust of those security forces by allowing those security forces to use the vehicles, use themselves and put up put down the guns and pick up the food parcels and do door-to-door delivery. You don't need to have a tender to do that. When you have soldiers that are supposed to be helping the community for humanitarian purposes to do that. We have made these proposals. We would not be in a situation where we're at now if some of those proposals were taken into consideration. But we are still calling for it. So we're saying even on the UIFM test, Mbongeni, you can't suspend paying because you want to deal with that one, but find a way of ensuring that those recipients still receive what is due to them. And by the way, UIF is a money that is a contribution between the employer and the employee, not even government. So you can't tell workers what you've been contributing to, you are unable to receive now, because we think there are others that we are still dealing with how we have managed as government to manage the process. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mongameli, and thank you, colleagues. We really do appreciate your presence here today. We know that people are still afraid to come to these kinds of media briefings, but we really do appreciate your presence. This media briefing is closed.
Can I sanitize for you guys? I'm trying to sanitize for them.
Oh yeah, sanitizing the mic. Yeah, that's good.
Sanitizing.